a Senior Social Development Specialist at the NGO and Civil Society Center in SDCC. Thank you for joining us today. We have a really exciting agenda ahead. We're going to open our event with a welcome message from SDCC's Director General, Concurrent Chief Compliance Officer, Mr. Woo Chung-hoon. DG Woo Chung has been a longtime champion of civil society engagement and a supporter of the NGOC. Since he joined ADB in 1993, DG Woo Chung has worked in a wide range of roles across the bank, including until recently as our secretary. And then in 2018, he rejoined the Social Development and Climate Change Department as our DG. In fact, it would take quite a long time to list all of DG Woo Chung's credentials and his roles at ADB. So I'd just like to leave you with one credential that really impresses the NGOC. Advocacy organizations really admire Woo Chung for his openness to engage with them and to listen to what they're saying. So Woo Chung, over to you. Thanks.
Lainey, thank you. You didn't tell me about this roasting in the beginning. I would not have accepted if you were going to do that. But anyway, so it's good to see everybody virtually. And yeah, it's been a long journey. ADB has come since the establishment of the NGO policy where we were, I think, jolted into getting engaged starting around, right after the Asian financial crisis. The issue of much better engagement with the civil society in general has really picked up. So again, welcome to this webinar on results for impact deepening civil society engagement, which also kicks off the annual training of the bank-wide CSO Cooperations Network, CSO Anchors. And it's going to be a great 3 days. And the 3-day training is designed for our CSO Anchors, and today's opening session is made accessible to all staff, so anyone interested can join in. And this actually is part of our cultural transformation, which you all know about, which was initiated by BPMSD. And we hope to create a culture of partnering with civil society in the way we operate in everything we do. So the training is designed and organized by the NGO and Civil Society Center with support from everyone, especially the regional department-based CSO Anchors. And civil society engagement is one of the most important way of doing business under 2030, Strategy 2030. And it is highlighted as one of the important approaches in achieving our development results. And it's written all over Strategy 2030. And specifically, the Operation 6 is quite relevant, although CSO engagement is sprinkled everywhere in all of the operation plans. And in OP6, we specifically mentioned that a meaningful citizen engagement and governance and institutional capacity efforts are critical because they help determine whether well-intentioned policies lead to desired development outcomes and meet citizens' expectations. OP6 further commits us to streamlining these partnership mechanisms with civil society and being able to provide technical assistance for our DMCs on more participatory, gender, and socially inclusive processes for designing policies and projects. And earlier this year, all of us, led by SPD, adopted the definition of meaningful CSO engagement and a corresponding corporate results framework indicator to monitor and evaluate. The NGOC has undertaken extensive consultation across the bank, and before the end of the year, we will update the OME4. I'm sure you all know what that stands for, on engagement with CSOs, and issue a new staff instruction on CSO engagement and a new template sections in the IPSA and SPRSS on CSO engagement. Normally, when I speak to the outside world, I would skip all those acronyms, but I think you are very well versed on these acronyms in ADB, especially in this space. So all these things are being done so that we can help make it easier for all of us to be able to implement civil society engagement. In particular, why is CSO engagement so crucial at this time of COVID-19 pandemic? We have seen how local CSOs and citizens groups are first to respond during disasters. They did the same when COVID-19 pandemic broke out. And we can see many examples of how they organize relief efforts, PPE production and distribution, addressing gaps in local food supply chains, and even in the monitoring of the use of COVID-19 budgets of their governments. We also have upcoming major policy reviews on energy, safeguards, program reviews of FCAS. So many are coming in, and CSOs play a very important role to bring all perspectives into the revision of these policies. The pandemic contexts offer both challenges and opportunities for us to deepen CSO engagement. So first, the use of ICT translates enables us to seek and share information on CSO more effectively and undertake wider consultation on our policies and projects. But at the same time, the digital space may be constricted, not secure, or flooded with fake news for some of our stakeholders given their context. We must ensure that our digital platforms or engagement are inclusive, transparent, and participatory by inviting a wider audience to our conversations, translating to several languages, making them accessible to the differently abled. And we also observe that CSO's flexibility and informality allow them to quickly shift the way they operate under the new normal, making them resilient to current challenges. They were able to quickly transform their operations and physical protests and campaigns to virtual forms. They were the first to call for ensuring mental health and well-being of workers and communities under this period of isolation and social distancing. Perhaps we can learn from CSOs on this aspect as we strengthen our relevance and the kind of support we can provide to our developing countries. We have some great examples of CSO engagement that we have continued or even initiated under this new normal. For example, the governance challenge led by the governance team in partnership with OGP, the wide intergenerational consultation done by Youth for Asia for the ongoing Asia Pacific Youth Symposium, the ongoing consultation of SDCC in leading our energy policy review, safeguards review, and FCAS, and so many others. I understand our CSO anchors will exchange on civil society engagement at the operational level further after this session. As mentioned, there are many directives in the ADB's new strategy which makes us to take the civil society engagement much more seriously. But that's not the reason why we do this. We should do this because it's good business to do it. CSO can really help identify our blind spots, and we all know that we all of us have them. So we must talk to CSO seriously so that we understand and the spots that we cannot see. And in this regard, I acknowledge the pivotal roles of our headquarters and resident mission-based CSO anchors that form the CSO cooperation network as our champions of civil society engagement within the Asian Development Bank. And I encourage all the heads of departments to make full use of this valuable network and the resources we have in SDCC and NGOC and the sector and thematic groups as we move forward as the knowledge bank, requiring more and deeper partnership with civil society. And finally, I'm extremely pleased to mention that the Vice President Susan Tono yesterday approved the $2 million TA from the COVID-19 window of the JFPR to enhance civil society engagement. And it will provide an innovative way to tap CSO strengths to address challenges like the pandemic. We are also using this as an amplified call for proposals that will enable CSOs to propose initiatives that will support their communities. And the project will support CSOs in 12 countries, and we are hoping to attract additional funding to expand our impact. So with that, let me stop here and let's have a very, very fruitful discussion this afternoon and onwards. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Woo Chung, for your welcome remarks. Please stay on standby for our next panel because our next event is a panel discussion with DG Perspectives on CSO engagement. Moderating the panel today is CERD CSO Focal Point, Ms. Pinsuda Alexander. Pinsuda is an economist for regional cooperation based in SURD's Regional Cooperation and Operations Coordination Division. So Pinsuda, over to you.
Thank you, Lainey. And pleasure to be here today, and also to be able to connect with all of our CSO anchors and other colleagues working with civil society across the bank. And a pleasure to be able to moderate this session with our two Director Generals, DG Kenichi Yokoyama from our South Asia Regional Department and DG Ramesh Subramaniam from our Southeast Asia Regional Department. Our panelist, DG Kenichi Yokoyama, has more than 20 years at ADB. He's worked primarily in South Asia, formerly the country director of the Nepal resident mission and also the India resident mission, and has been working in areas covering water resources with a background in agriculture economics and agriculture engineering. DG Ramesh Subramanian from our Southeast Asia Regional Department has also been with ADB for more than 20 years with a focus on public sector work and infrastructure financing. He also oversees sub-regional cooperation work in the ASEAN countries, including the Brunei, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, East ASEAN Growth Area, the Greater Mekong Subregion, and Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, IMTGT Growth Triangle. So without further ado, let me turn first to DG Kenichi Yokoyama and ask him to provide his opening remarks, 3-minute opening remarks, responding to the question, how do you see advocacy and service providers, CSOs, concretely contributing to ADB's development targets? So first we'll turn to DG Kenichi and then DG Ramesh. DG Kenichi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity. Yeah, so let me just provide perspectives from South Asia operations. Our department engages 6 countries, and CSO engagement, I would say, is quite substantial. I think for projects including social environmental safeguards, I think almost all projects engage CSO, particularly in case of social safeguards, monitoring and supporting the implementation of social safeguards. And we also have the operations, particularly agriculture and natural resources, which goes to the bottom of the taking a bottom-up approach of implementation, participatory approach. So when we deal with the farmers and irrigation associations, the participation and the group formation and strengthening their capacity for manage water, agriculture extension. So those are areas where NGOs have particular strengths. So that's another area that we have a lot of engagements. And also third is continuously meeting this gender targets. And I was told by the team that for almost 60% of the entire projects having gender as a theme is having CSO engagement as a service provider. And the 80% of the schemes have some engagements with the community-based organizations, and 100% of the JC schemes, the element schemes are at least having engagements in NGOs. So in our perspective, I think NGOs' strength is really they have the outreach to the, to the really remotest areas and the poorest, communities. So we do have a great benefit working with them when the government system is difficulty to reach there, in terms of social safeguards or providing livelihood enhancement. And we also feel, sometimes advocacy NGOs are also independently monitoring the safeguards activities and sometimes raise hands and, give us some warning. But I think we usually take it positively because they have a kind of extra, watchdog role to provide, red flags, and then we can immediately respond. And sometimes these advocacy NGOs have much deeper knowledge about, developed country environmental safeguards, social safeguards, and I think it was they who initially advocated, no, we should look at cumulative environmental impacts, I think 10 or 15 years ago, and now we are also reflecting those. So in that sense, we have ample opportunities working, like at the grassroots level, approach to the poor, as well as policy level dialogues, and we feel really, the role of CSO is extremely important in terms of outreach, equality of services, as well as our policy level dialogues. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, DG Kenichi. DG Ramesh, can I turn to you to respond to the same question in terms of how can CSOs help ADB in achieving its development targets? Please, over to you.
Thanks very much, Pinsuda. I wanted to start with a story. This is a long time back in 99 or 2000. I think we used to, some of the colleagues who've been in ADB for that long would know, we had a DG, Mr. Satish Rao. So one day in the evening when I was seated late in the office, sitting there looking at my computer, sitting like this. And we have a saying in India that if you're sitting like this, your ship has sunk. You're not supposed to sit like that. You're never supposed to put your hands on your chin. So he asked me what's going on. I said, some problems in projects. And particularly this was in one of the Central Asian countries where we have, particularly, they were not exactly advocacy CSOs, but there were certainly parties who were involved, who had definitely interest and concerns in terms of what's going on in the country with the asset divestment process. So they had sent a long communication. So Mr. Rao told me, look, you need to look at this as a positive challenge. Just imagine, first of all, they won't come to ADB if they don't have problems. They're coming to ADB because they want our help. And imagine if they had not been there, probably you wouldn't have come to know that that there are problems on the ground. So that certainly is an eye opener when we are looking at CSOs, advocacy or service CSOs, no matter what they do, from that perspective. As Ken mentioned, in the case of Southeast Asia as well, plenty of opportunities to work with CSOs. And I guess needless to say, this is true across all sub-regions of ADB. No matter what sector that we are dealing with, there is a very strong role that advocacy and service CSOs play. A few points come to mind, and again, I'll share a couple of stories. One of them is from Central Asia, urban municipal water supply subsector, to be specific. I was director at the time, went on a mission, and because there was a whistleblower who informed us that some things were not going on well in a project. And we went there, and I went with the team. This was a water treatment plant. And when you have water treatment plant in your mind, you're looking for something kind of a decent sized building. They showed me, this is the building that we have built. It was more like an electric pump shed. So I was shocked, went inside, and I had to literally lie down on the floor. And much to my horror, I noticed that the plate that was attached to what was presented as a water purification equipment had something written as this machine was refurbished from 1989. or so. And this was presented as a new asset that was brought under the project. So obviously, subsequently we took actions, and the project was brought under integrity scope. And we put in place corrective actions. Now that was brought on to us by a CSO engagement that we had as part of the project, because we were operating in a number of different rural communities. We have a lot of positive impacts. Take the case of post-tsunami reconstruction in Indonesia and Aceh province. I would say that without the Chris Morris knows the space very well. Without the engagement that we had with some of the CSOs, we would not have been able to deliver what we took up, which was a huge challenge, particularly in housing reconstruction. I think we ended up constructing about close to 5,500 houses or so. The CSO engagement was very critical to do a kind of a double check on the titles that people owned, land titles that people had of properties. And now more recently in the context of Myanmar, where CSO engagement has been so critical, particularly in conflict affected areas. So I guess, the eyes and ears on the ground type of role that CSOs play is so critical. Transparency and accountability that they bring to the table, again, immensely critical. If we look at it in a broader context of value for money in a different sense, not from a procurement perspective, but in terms of overall development effectiveness, clearly, I think the role that the CSOs play is immensely important. As Woo Chong said, Strategy 2030 very clearly highlights the importance, and I'm very happy that we've, from a corporate point of view, we've taken a number of steps. Institutional point of view, we've taken a number of steps that makes it easier for us to engage with CSOs. Let me pause there, Pinsuda, and I'll come back to some other points later. Over to you.
Thank you so much, DG Ramesh. Both points highlighted from DG Kenichi and DG Ramesh in terms of how advocacy NGOs and service providers can support ADB operations and really help our development effectiveness. So now we'll open up into and some earlier thoughts from DG Woo Chong as well. So now we'll open up to all three DGs in a panel discussion on the first two questions. And then after that, we'll continue on with discussions and Q&A from the audience. And so if anyone in the audience, if any of our colleagues have questions that they would like to raise to the DGs, you can go ahead and put those in the chat box. But in the meantime, let's kick off the panel by asking questions to the three DGs. The first question is, what are challenges and opportunities that you see for ADB in cooperating with advocacy and service provider NGOs? And some of this has been touched on already in your opening remarks, but specifically, how do you see these challenges and opportunities changing under the new normal context, in the context of COVID, for example? DG Kenichi, may I start with you?
Yeah, thank you. So opportunities that I have already mentioned. So we have plenty of opportunities over there. Then the challenge, I would say, is, we are eventually working with our DMCs. So our aim is to help DMCs to address their development challenges by effective engagement with CSOs. So that's something that we need to always aim at, based on our engagement with the DMCs. But then NGOs has to be a service providing contractor to the government. And it's extremely challenging for, as usually, this equal partnership between the employer and employee, the NGOs. And sometimes they are not treated effectively, efficiently. And sometimes, the important, value of a CSO is really to go to the grassroots and provide us some information that is really important for project implementation. Sometimes, so that kind of relationship management with the government is quite a challenge. So we need to have a regular dialogues with our counterparts. I think usually, if we talk with, Indian government, Bangladeshi government, Nepali government, and how we speak to them, we have been able to at least successfully engaging NGOs for social safeguards related activities, as well as gender-related activities. And another challenge, I would say, is also real competent NGOs also do equal partnership with also to ADB. So some of them do not want to even engage with us. They want to be totally independent. And so when we want to have those NGOs, maybe probably the value of such NGOs is really knowledge and know-how and about, so in that sense, we can engage them as advisor or knowledge provider. But using their excellent implementation framework to, reach to the, let's say, a social service delivery and adapting their method is probably another challenge. Another one, I would say, is advocacy NGOs. Some of them, we try to make, their comments positively, but some of them really rooted to some kind of ideological, stance that totally against whatever, multilateral development banks are doing. So some kind of suspicions are over there. So in those cases, sometimes talking with them on some of the, safeguards policy matters or labor issues is not so easy. But we try our best to make, focus on our discussion on real programs rather than some ideological kind of background. So those are some areas. And in terms of COVID-19 in South Asia, it looks many NGOs are also facing financial problems, and of course, but they are committed people, and how to deal with this digital kind of environment. But I think since our project officers cannot go to the field, and sometimes even NGOs are contracted by the government, we our staff directly contacts them, and they are really as I said, grassroots level. It's really useful, and we are really getting benefit from direct contacting and getting the field level situation. So that's a kind of opportunity there, and we need to be cautious. This is a particular situation. We have to use a good mix of digital means and also physical, contact still possible through those grassroots agencies. So overall, I think opportunity. Challenges are there, but I think we should be always. Doing our best to address those challenges, get the best out of them. Thank you.
Thank you, DG Kenichi. Certainly there are a number of challenges and opportunities for working with NGOs in this new normal in the COVID environment. DG Ramesh, can I turn to you?
Just a couple of points, Vinsuda. I think Ken already covered a lot of very useful ground. Many of the issues, if you're looking at it from a sub-regional point of view, would be applicable to Southeast, and as I said, to other sub-regions as well. Just to reiterate a point that I made earlier, I think I would definitely say with 200-300% certainty and confidence that without CSOs, regardless of the role that they play, our role will be immensely difficult for various good reasons that we all know. If whether pre-COVID or in the new normal, clearly CSOs will be complementing the limited resources and the capacity that we have in the public sector, as well as balancing, I won't say vested, but kind of focused interests of the private sector, broadly defined, right? Because you've got public sector with its own mandate and objectives, and you'll have other players who will have their own interests. So certainly CSOs, there could be exceptions, but most of them do have balanced perspectives in the interest of, in the interest, actually interest is interesting, it's public interest, right, which is what CSOs take. Now, at the same time, challenges are there. Mindset certainly is a big challenge that we need to overcome. I think, if we are all honest, put our hands on our heart, even in ADB, it's a mindset change for team leaders to genuinely bring in CSOs and to work with them. We always talk that it should not be a box-ticking exercise. Lainey, who used to be in SCRD, we've had long chats in the context of our work in the Greater Mekong sub-region, for instance, or in Indonesia. Clearly, that mindset is a challenge that we need to work. Now, this mindset is in public sector institutions as well as in CSOs and NGOs. Now, in this regard, as I mentioned earlier, there could be some CSOs with their own interests, and it is our responsibility to collectively take a kind of an overall balanced approach in terms of going for those who would be providing the most neutral, the most value-adding services. And we also need to look at assess the capacity to engage and manage CSOs. This is from ADB's point of view, as well as if you are looking at executing agencies and implementing agencies that we work with. But having presented both, I would say that on balance, overall, the opportunities certainly outweigh the challenges or the costs that we face. And particularly now in the COVID and the post-COVID context, I would say there are a lot of opportunities. In terms of challenges, we are looking at pretty serious revenue compression and limited resources, which means that expenditure reorientation is going to be taking place, and there will be continued need for social assistance, social protection, and recovery is not going to be easy. So in this context, the CSOs have a clear value-adding strong role to play, either as consultants or support for project implementation, but I think in parallel also as very important feedback providers. And if we are setting up, grievance redressal type of mechanisms in whatever we do, the feedback that CSOs can provide could be very important. In Southeast Asia, as part of the CPROs that we've approved for 5 countries, in all the CPROs, we have set out a country engagement framework. And there are 4 committees for each country. There is a CSO committee, which we have convened in the case of Indonesia, and we will be convening in the Philippines. And 3 other countries will follow suit, Thailand, Cambodia, and Myanmar. And we are learning quite useful pointers from the exercise that we've done in Indonesia, for instance. And a point that we are also now, particularly in the post-COVID context, given the difficulties that we are going to have in terms of mobility, particularly locally based CSOs can be playing a hugely important role in terms of day-to-day, monitoring in terms of what's going on. I'll mention the case of Myanmar. In the transport sector, where we've had good feedback that's come from CSOs in the past, in the pre-COVID time, we are now talking to some of those NGOs who had provided feedback to make sure that things are going well, because our review missions have not been able to go to the affected areas. And recently we had an unfortunate accident which is not connected to an ADB, because of ADB project. But there again, we got feedback from CSOs, which was quite helpful. Final point I wanted to mention is particularly now in the post-COVID context with significant amounts of public support in the form of either SME stimulus or other social protection type of stimulus going in, CSOs can play a great role by being independent and providing neutral oversight on financial management. Now, this is not just post-COVID, and we've seen this playing a very important role in post-disaster situations. For example, in the Philippines, in the construction post-conflict reconstruction support that we are providing in Marawi, we are working with a set of CSOs, and likewise the Aceh context that I already mentioned. So I think there are a lot of opportunities we can look ahead positively to work with them. Let me pause there, Pinsuda.
Thank you so much, DG. Both DGs shared some very concrete examples of ways that CSOs are helping to provide eyes and ears on the ground for projects that are unreachable in the COVID context, ways that CSOs will be able to provide monitoring and kind of neutral monitoring for the projects that have been approved in COVID response. Let me turn to DG Wuchang, if we could get your perspective also on challenges and opportunities that we see with CSOs, both advocacy and service provider CSOs in this new normal. DG Wuchang?
Yeah, so actually my comment is not so much on, specific to the new normal situation per se, but it's in general. As I mentioned, the CSO engagement is very important. Whether they're advocacy or development and CSOs, we have to make sure that we are very proactive and getting to them upfront, and not be seen as kind of like an afterthought. And because that's when we get into a problem, because we'll find out what we need to deal with too late in the game. So as Ramesh said, you cannot be a ticking the box exercise, and since the Ramesh and Ken are both from operations, they can talk more about the grassroots CSOs. But in our case, working from the center, we do deal a lot with the policy level, right? So as I mentioned, safeguards and energy, these two big. I think CSOs will, especially the advocacy CSOs will love me in particular, because we are giving them this great opportunity to throw lots of interesting stuff at us, right? So knowing that, we started our safeguard policy update, a review about a month and a half ago, but I was in the US for about a month, and I took that opportunity to actually go to Washington DC and met up with the big guns of the advocacy CSO, led by the big, the Bank Information Center, the Human Rights Watch, and all of them. And before we actually started reviewing anything, so we actually explained what we're trying to do and what are some of the findings from the IED, so that we hear from them what are the concerns they have, and what are some of the deal breakers in their mind, so that we actually have enough time to deal with them. So we wanted to, we started that up front. Bruce Dunn may have thought I was crazy to do that at this point, but I think it was an investment well spent. But we are actually continuing our dialogue so that we can iron out as much as possible. And at the end of the day, there are things that we totally agree, and then there are things that we do not agree. But what we must agree is that we've given everybody enough opportunity to give us feedback, and then let us consider everything and deal with it in the right way. In terms of COVID, it's the challenge is that we cannot go to the field right now, right? And I think some of the CSOs can't either, but they do have a lot of people on the ground as well. So I think it's kind of forcing us to do more of CSO engagement, as I mentioned, because you need to get people on the ground to be active, and perhaps they can help us, they can come out of their comfort zone and help us beyond their immediate, area of interest, and do more, so that we build trust. And I think the key to effective engagement with the CSO is not about paying them or contracting them as consultants, but getting their trust and the respect, right? So I think they are very smart, and it's amazing, what day in day out they do, the work they do, and helping the communities, and we should respect that as well. So make sure that we put our best people forward in dealing with the CSOs, and know what we're doing, and most importantly, we gotta show our ear. We have to listen very, very sincerely and take the next step forward. So let me stop there. And just one last point is the IT, Zoom, all that stuff. I think in a way it's easier to reach out to different CSOs all in one go as well. So there's a tremendous opportunity there.
Great. Thank you so much, DG Woo-chung. That touches back on what DG Kenichi was saying about, this equal partnership between NGOs and government or the public sector, and, the trust that needs to be gained by both sides to be able to have both competent NGOs that can perform the work, and also to build, this, as you mentioned, to reach out early in projects, whether it's in formulation or in policy formulation, to be able to engage with CSOs and get their feedback early before things may blow up into a bigger situation. There is a second question here for the panel. Instead of going one by one, I will open this up for whoever would like to respond to it. And it also follows on a question from one of our colleagues in the chat box. The question is, in terms of policies and actions, how is ADB enhancing the environment for CSOs to be able to participate in ADB operations? And the follow-up question that's in the chat box from one of our colleagues is the procurement process for ADB to bring on CSOs, especially small grassroots organizations, can be quite a challenge. So how can we, do you have any thoughts or ideas on how we can improve the process of engaging CSOs in procurement or in other ways? And any of the DGs can jump in.
Ramesh was DG PPFT. Actually, no, before, so I'll give him time to think. No, this is something actually Lainey has been working on from our side, because that's one of the complaints we've been hearing many times from many people, that we treat them like consultants and they're really not. And this is one of the new modalities that we have to really explore. So I think we have to engage them as a partners, and figure out a way to pay them. And unfortunately, I think our payment to give them anybody money, you have to get them as consultant or maybe resource speaker of some sort. But perhaps Lainey has the latest development. But maybe from the Operation Digi side, setting aside what the current system allows us to do, maybe we can hear from them what's their wishful thinking in terms of how best to engage the CSOs. Now, we have the same issue with the engaging, let's say, development partners, like in Australia. There are a lot of development partners who want to come in, work with us, but not as consultant, but as partners.
Thanks so much, DG Woo-chung. DG Ramesh or DG Kenichi, did you want to add anything about how we can better engage CSOs, ease our processes for engaging them?
Maybe a couple of points, Pinsuda. I think if we, before we go to policies, maybe if you look at actions, right? Actions, basically the actions are coming from us, coming from staff. As long as the actions are fitting in within the broad policy framework. My view is that we have been able to engage CSOs in many different ways, even if there have been constraints in the past. It really depends on the project team leaders as well as others who, for example, cross-cutting specialists who may be working with the project team leaders, and the directors and ourselves as the head of department and so on, I think we have found ways. Now, in fact, just before I saw the question from our colleague in VRM, I had put a point for myself that the procurement framework has become easier, but still there are wrinkles in terms of engaging with CSOs. The point that Wu Chong made, and a complaint or concern that have come from CSOs is that we cannot treat them at the same level as consulting companies, because they won't be able to put in proposals or expressions of interest in the same way as large companies would do. So there have been requests from many CSOs, can we identify things that will be done only by CSOs and go for a separate EOI process for CSOs. Well, in Southeast Asia, we haven't done it except in the context of GMS, for instance, where we've gone to kind of special service providers who are not typical consulting type of outfits, but who have come in and provided us with either advisory support or advocacy type of support. These could be kind of service organizations or associations of various groups. But having said that, I think on the procurement framework, I would say that there is certainly more flexibility. But it is for us to take it forward with specific proposals. Now, mind change in our mindset is also quite important. I think here I'm quite positive and optimistic with where we are in comparison to where we were like even 10 years ago. In this regard, are we seeing engagement with CSOs as a kind of a want versus need? In the early days, it was a necessity, because we were expected to consult with CSOs and NGOs and say that, okay, we have this framework that as part of the SPRSS or anything special that we may put. But now I think it is slowly shifting towards want, that I do want to engage with CSOs. How can I make it happen? So that's a good healthy shift, and we do need to look for opportunities. But at the same time, I think also learning from the good and the bad. Sometimes engaging engaging with any outside entity may be a challenging process. So how do we manage that becomes important. I think continuous. Whether it's training for project team leaders or for team members, but certainly continued advocacy within ADB is also quite important. So that's where the role of the NGO anchors becomes so important. And I think the roles of ourselves as the heads of department, of how we can foster a culture of kind of a cooperative relationship within teams. And so CSO engagement is not seen as a pain, even if it doesn't become pleasure, but can we make it easier in terms of engaging with CSOs is what we need to be going towards. Let me pause there.
Great. Thank you so much, DG Ramesh.
Few points. Yeah, is it okay?
Yes.
I think for policy making side, yeah, I think whenever this SDCC prepares policy, the Wu Chong is doing very good work, and I really appreciate it. I think I have some contacts in NGO. What is the NGO? I mean, associated with ADB, and somehow they appreciate ADB's engagement in policy dialogues on such safeguards policy review and various policy reviews. And also SARD side, we also are starting to prepare, taking stock of what's going on in terms of JESSI, operational framework, and also wants to have a kind of a policy guidelines for South Asia. On how we go ahead with the JESSI engagements, operational engagements. That's to some extent we also want to go ahead with some more policy level engagement. For that, I think Francesco is engaging NGOs. Also, I hope we also are approaching to more advocacy ones. So I think as far as whatever ADB is doing, I think we are providing reasonably a good environment. And the challenge is how we engage such, facilitate such, policy making process by the government to engage those CSOs. And that also sometimes a challenge, but whenever we have, say, sometimes we work with the government. I remember Bangladesh, we supported them to prepare what is participatory water resource development policy. So they were happy to also find to engage some advocacy NGOs, which were raising red flags against ADB projects. But those are, I think, as far as the objective is to do some positive policies, and definitely a government often wishes to incorporate various views so that they don't have to face less pressure when they finalize a policy. So in that sense, that's always a challenge, but depending on how we engage governments, we try our best to let them be open to inviting think tanks and advocacy NGOs, civil society groups in those government policy making process. And I'm always hopeful and also advocate our staff to do so. Of course, as I said, there are some difficult NGOs are there, but it's I hope this can be manageable. In terms of the procurement, yeah, I agree this is a challenge, and in particular, in case of Nepal, actually, there's lots of dubious civil society. They call it civil society, but they are kind of business-oriented service provider, which is not providing good services. So, but I think the procurement guidelines have been progressively changed over time. And I think one way is to adapt, quality-based selection for some, particular area. You define quality, and yeah, if you're worried about cost, you just put the maximum cost. Cost estimate, and then let NGOs to come up with good proposals, and based on experience criteria, you can do that. So in that sense, there are ways to do that, and procurement guideline has increasingly provided flexibility. So I think staff are encouraged to find good ways to manage, and I think. I also told that the mobilization advance amount has been increased recently. So in that sense, my suggestion is to engage PPFD, engage a portfolio team of the department, and try to see how best we can deliver good services. Thank you.
Just a quick update. I was told that on this procurement issue, our team led by Lainey has been working with PPFD, and I assume they've been consulting with the CSO anchors as well. That the draft staff instruction is with PPFD for their second review, for us to be able to engage these entities as this thing called NCS. Non-consulting service contract for some of these organizations, but as Kenichi mentioned, I think we need a way for us to validate and vet the CSOs, because there's many of them are really good, truly dedicated CSOs, and many of them may not be. So this is where I think our proper due diligence is there. So hopefully maybe Lainey, make sure that you circulate the draft staff instruction with all the NGO anchors so that they know which direction it's being discussed. And also there's a discussion with SPD on how to engage the CSOs as partners. So there are kind of a couple of tracks going. One is sort of contract, and then the other one is sort of partnership agreement.
Thank you for all of this, all those responses. Between the policy work that's being done to be able to support CSO engagement, from the staff instruction that DG Wucheng just mentioned to the cultural shift and the mindset shift that DG Ramesh mentioned, and both DGs shared some perspectives of the ways that NGOs are working either in advisory capacity, for example, in monitoring the CPRO projects, or in advisory and consultations, or as DG Kenichi mentioned earlier, CSOs are really active in South Asia in terms of achieving the gender targets. There are some questions that came in through the registration, and we have a couple of questions that have also come up in the sidebar chat. I think we have time for maybe just one more before we need to wrap up. So let me ask one that's a little bit different, which is about, that hasn't really come up yet in the discussion, and it's about, this question was about the use of the Asia Pacific Disaster Response Fund, but I think the question could really be widened to, could other funds be used and made available to NGO or INGO consortiums? Right now, TA funds seem to be dispersed only to DMC governments. And the justification behind the question is that NGOs, as has been mentioned, have a strong presence on the ground. So is there a way that we can channel funds or find specific funds, as was mentioned earlier, identify things that are specifically to be done by NGOs and CSOs? So any takers on that question?
APDRF is mine, no? So I should talk about it. So this issue is, in principle, this money has to be channeled through the government. And, for example, when we did the COVID-19 response for procuring PPEs, personal protective equipment, the money was allocated to the government. And then through that, we can actually give it to whoever we can give it to. So we cannot give directly to NGOs or CSOs without passing through the government. But so as long as the government is fully engaged, and if the government thinks that the particular CSO is able to deliver whatever service that needs to be undertaken on the ground, then we can send to them at the request of the government. Right now, there is no particular mechanism for us to use that money directly for CSOs. But I think there are other TA resources which can be channeled through CSOs for whatever specific topic. So perhaps if you have any particular case, then you can raise with our team and then see what we can do.
And the TA that you mentioned earlier that has just been approved can also be an opportunity for use of TA funds for engaging CSOs.
Yeah, and that's actually particularly, that's part of the money that was given by the Japanese government for COVID-19. So I think there was $775 million allocated, earmarked in the JFPR pot, but can only be used for COVID-19 related activities. So that's $2 million there. So I think there's going out for seeking proposals. So Lainey can tell you all about it.
And we'll have time over the next couple of days of training to discuss that. I think we are nearing an end to our session. Actually, we are just at time now. So let me just take a quick second to wrap up some of and summarize some of the discussions I've been trying to do so along the way. But thank you, DG Wuchong, DG Kenichi, DG Ramesh, for all of your shared perspectives. As has been said, NGOs are acting as service providers, helping to be eyes and ears on the ground, are helping to reach gender targets, are helping to provide transparency and kind of a neutral balance to our public sector programming, and also value for money, not just in terms of how they can, how they may be able to deliver for less, but they can also help us make sure that our funds and resources, and limited resources, particularly these days, are able to be used effectively. We also talked about different policies and actions, particularly about changes in mindsets, trying to the shift in ADB culture almost as a necessity, right? As we're not able to get out in the field to use NGOs and CSOs more on the ground, being able to leverage digital technology and connectivity to be able to reach out to more NGOs. And also in the background, a lot of the really excellent policy work that's being done in SDCC in terms of engaging NGOs from the early stage, whether it's on safeguards or energy policy, or also just the work that's being done to be able to facilitate staff being able to engage NGOs through the staff instruction that Lainey has been working on. So there's a lot going on, and it means so much to be able to have all three DGs here to be able to open up this session and to be able to share your perspectives and experiences, because there's, as we've heard, quite a wealth of experiences and ideas in how you see our work with NGOs, and also means a lot to be able to see the emphasis that you put on it in executing our operations as well. So thank you very much, DG Wuchang, DG Ramesh, DG Kenichi. We'll close there.
Thank you very much. Great job as a moderator, and thank you for taking on this role.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Spencer, and thanks to the organizers. Fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good luck for the discussions.
Thank you. Thank you very much to our panelists. And we are really very much inspired by the messages given by our DGs today. We appreciate also the affirmation you are giving our CSO anchors, that they are doing it right in terms of CSE and their desire to improve further on what we're doing. We also thank our colleagues who joined us today. Before you sign out, please click the link to the evaluation form in the chat box. We'll appreciate receiving your feedback on our session today. Please join us again tomorrow, same time, for a similar dialogue. For tomorrow, we'll talk with CSO women leaders, Oxfam Asia Regional Director Lan Mercado, and India's Self-Employed Women's Association CEO Rima Nanavati. They will speak on CSO perspectives on engaging with us, with ADB, under the new normal context. So check the chat box for the Zoom link to this session. In the meantime, may we request our CSO anchors who registered for the full 3-day training to please stay online. We'll just have a 5-minute break, but we'll remain online. You can stand up, grab your food or drinks, take a health break, and we'll be back after 5 minutes. Coming up next is our session on Stories of Change, Meaningful Civil Society Engagements, which will feature updates from our regional CSO anchors on their experiences on civil society engagement this year, 2020. Thank you very much, everyone. Once again, we are grateful to our panelists for joining us today.